Well, the handler's going to say that the dog's alert or indication can only mean that drugs are present. Let's cross-examine to establish that isn't true, because the training records we have, Your Honor, show that the dog was trained on pseudo-controlled substances or overtrained on narcotics masking agents. Let's think for a moment about how these dogs are trained, because it's really not rocket science. First, the county commissioners allow the law enforcement officers to spend somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 to buy this dog from the original company. Then they match the dog and the handler. First, the handler starts playing with the dog using a towel or a blanket so that the dog begins to associate that blanket or towel as its toy. Then the officer begins to hide narcotics or pseudo-controlled substances in the blanket, and the doggy and the handler play fetch with the blanket, with the drugs or pseudo-drugs in the blanket. Then the dog begins to further associate the smell of drugs with its blanket. Then the officer hides the drugs. The dog goes and looks for the drugs, thinking the dog will find his play toy. When the drugs are found, the officer then rewards the dog by giving the dog the play toy towel or blanket, or rewards it further by giving it a milk bone or something. Some facilities use pseudo-controlled substances like methylbenzoate to train the dogs on, rather than using, for instance, real cocaine. Thus, the dog's alert on your client's suitcase doesn't so much mean that narcotics are present therein, as maybe it means there is clothing in the package or luggage which once was near perfume, which also, along with bubble gum and snapdragons, gives off methylbenzoate. Even the Drug Enforcement Administration agrees. Departments should select a facility which trains canines to alert to the scent of controlled substances rather than pseudo-controlled substances. Training with the pseudo-substances may train the canine away from the drugs and onto the pseudo-substances. Same thing with using masking agents to hide the drugs, in things that also contain known masking agents like coffee grounds, lemon peels, orange peels, dryer sheets or fabric softener, or cellophane. If the dog is overtrained on drugs hidden with masking agents, it may have the effect of training the dog off of the drugs and onto the masking agents. The DEA Guide to Canine Interdiction agrees. Initial training should avoid training with masking agents in the same location as the controlled substances because of the risk of contamination and the creation of incorrect association in the canine with the masking agents. Well, the handler is going to say that it was the dog that alerted. Let's cross-examine to make sure it wasn't the handler that alerted. Was the dog on the leash or off the leash when the dog supposedly went to its final response on your client's repository of personal items? If the dog was on the leash, then the handler has the capacity to generate all kinds of even subconscious cues to the dog through the veritable telegraph cable of the leash. And I always think it's important in cross-examining handlers to cross-examine on what we always cross-examine, on bias. Remember, before the handler got to be a handler, he had to wear a gun and a badge and drive into dangerous parts of town and maybe get shot at. Now, every day, as long as his dog continues to produce good results, he just plays fetch with the doggy every day. If the doggy turns out to be inadequate, then Officer Timothy may have to go back and do real police work. So we want to ask questions like, who arranged the baggage or package array containing the item that the other officers thought was suspect? If The handler is the one who placed the bag in the baggage or package lineup that the other police officers suspect contains drugs. Then is the dog alerting to the presence of drugs, or is the dog alerting to the only bag or package in the array that has the dog's best friend's scent on it? Really, this ought to be kind of a blind situation. If the narcotics officers in the field call out the dog and the handler should be blind to which package, baggage, or which part of the car the officers in the field suspect contains drugs. Even if you've got an honest handler, there is the possible role of experimenter expectancy effect. And I think you know this really from that new guy that's on the National Geographic Channel, the dog whisperer. He'll tell you the dog will do what the owner expects. So you've got the phenomenon of experimenter expectancy effect. If the officer, the handler, suspects where or knows where the drugs are, then the handler has the capacity to relay all kinds of even subconscious cues to the dog. So we want to look at the videos and see what is the handler doing when the dog goes to its final response on your client's suitcase or package. Is the handler talking to another officer, but the handler stops talking when the dog gets near the suspect item? Does the handler start talking when the doggy gets near the suspect item? Does the handler move when the dog gets near the item that the other narcotics officers suspect contains narcotics? Does the officer or the handler even shift his weight? We want to look for all those things, and I think cross-examine about them.